Hello, good morning, students. So today I'll start the new chapter, which is called as constructors and destructors. So chapter 5, it's right next after classes and object. So classes and object, we took a long time to finish classes and object chapter. Uh, if you have any doubts on that, go through the YouTube videos again and again, and through some tutorials. Okay, search for some tutorials, and then yes, as much as possible you try to practice all these solve exercises, higher order thinking. Okay, even the some of the programs I've not taught, but you try to practice on your own. Okay, so practice is needed so that you will excel in this subject. Okay, now as per the assignment, I expect all of you to submit the assignment on time. Okay, so all the three short programs, that is to find the syntax error, okay, or what is the um, spot the error, like that. Okay, and then that program, which is that this question. Okay, so the data members are there, and then the member functions are there. You just have to declare a class. Okay, and then write a program to create an array of 10 objects. So you have to declare an object. Okay, and then run that program, and then check it out. If there's any error, okay, correct the error, and then uh, ty- uh, write the correct program, and then submit it to me. Okay, so before by Saturday you submit all those three programs. Okay, so by that I will know how much you are understanding. Okay, so today we will start the new chapter that is called as classes, constructors and destructors. Now, if you are very much familiar with this object oriented programming concept by now, okay, and then classes and object, okay, then constructors and destructors also, you won't face that much problem. Okay, because it is related with the, those previous chapters. Okay, in the in classes and object, okay, in you learn a very new thing. Okay, you use the class to declare an object. So with the object you allocate memory for the data members, that is the variables. So these variables belongs to the object, right? And these are defined by the class. So a class creates objects, or create an object or multiple objects which all share the same data members, like that, right? So in there you have seen that for an object you have data members, and then member functions to access the data members, and then data members needs to be explicitly declared, or the member functions also needs to be explicitly declared, and you have access specifiers, private, public, protected, like that, right? So all those were for security purpose. There you learn the concept of encapsulation, data hiding, abstraction, okay, in the previous chapters. So now, how is these constructors and destructors related with what you have learned previously? Okay, as I told you before that you try to understand the first chapter and the second chapter, that is object-oriented programming concepts, and then especially classes and object, which is very important for you to understand. Then the rest of the chapters will become much easier. Okay, so constructors and destructors. Now today, so here, so I'll just go through the intro part first. Okay, as you now know a fair amount about C++ classes, you are probably wondering about its initialization features. Okay, so initialization. Okay, you can create complicated data types and design sets of functions to work with these data types. Suppose for a moment that an object of your class already has a legal value. For instance, text strings in it contains only printable characters. In this case, if you prepare your set of member functions accurately and apply the access rules wisely, then you can be sure that your object will always have legal values in future. Okay, so in the just suppose like an example of this one. here you can see that or uh, suppose like yeah, suppose like here you are declaring an object, okay, and this member function is for inputting the value, and this member function is for displaying the value, right? So what happens is that, oh, based on the object, okay, based on the object and then the data type, you are putting means like legal values, the word as I said, as is written there, legal values, like here employee code, employee name through the gets function, employee designation, salary, right? So what happens is that you will be entering the values, or like you'll be directly assigning through the object, right? emb code equals to 100, like that, right? Now if suppose this salary was not assigned through the scene or through the scene statement, right? Now what will happen is that when this cout statement gets run, that is basic salary, if you have not assigned in here, okay, that this c input stream that means if you have not entered from the keyboard for the employee salary, what will happen is that when this function gets run, gets executed, okay, cout, it will display the employee code which you have entered here, okay, it will display the employee name which you have entered here, it will display the employee designation which you have entered here, okay. But what about the salary you have not entered, right? So what will happen, uh, since you have called out using the salary, the emb salary using the cout statement, right? So what will happen is that it will display a value, but since you have not entered anything, right, it will display what is known as a garbage value, right? So which you are getting incorrect output value, right? So just an example, okay. So like that, this is what it means by, okay, see, however object just created may contain just random garbage, so how can you initialize a new object? Okay, so for that purpose constructors is very much essential. Okay, so similar problems can arise when your objects go out of scope. So when the role of the object gets over, okay, they should be destroyed by the compiler. So but only when you know which cleanup operations are necessary to destroy them properly. So that is the role of that, what you call as destructor. Okay, so that is how you implement. Now so based on that, in addition to all the member functions you create for your objects, okay, so the member functions that are created for the object, suppose like input data, display data, like that, okay, there are two special kinds of functions that you should create for every object. So now you need to create two types of functions, member functions. Not only the input data function or display data function or executing the program logic function, but two very important member functions which you need to create for every object, okay, that is, they are called constructors and destructors. So constructors are called every time you create an object, and destructors are called every time you destroy an object, okay. So this sentence explains it all, okay. What is the role of a constructor? Every time an object gets created or declared, constructor is called. And when object gets destroyed, or when the role of the object is done in the program, okay, destructor is used, okay. Destructor is called to terminate that object, okay, or yeah, to vacate the memory space, okay. So we will be I'll explain more on this. So now, what is constructor? Okay, as per the definition, constructor is a special member function that enables an object to initialize itself when it is created, okay. So it that enables an object to initialize itself when it is created. So how does an object initialize itself? Initializing means what? assigning values to the object, right? And where do you assign the values to the object? Not directly in the object. Keep remember that object itself is a variable, right? And data members are variables, but data members are variables of the object, right? So object, using the object you can assign the values to the data members. Okay, so that is initialize. Okay, so yeah, so constructors are functions which are called whenever a new instance of a class is created. New instance means whenever new object of a class is created. Okay, so constructors are called automatically when a class creates an object, or when class declares an object, that is in the main function section, right? Okay, so they are often used to initialize the data in the class, that is the data members. Okay, where in the class, suppose like in this particular example. Okay, now this is the class name, this is the employee, right? So the role of the constructor is to initialize these data members. Okay, these data members, and these data members. Okay, so there are several times when instance of a class can be created before main is called. Okay, when a function is called in which the object is declared, that is in the main. Okay, or it could be in the calling function, call function, like that. Okay, when the new operator is used. Okay, so we'll see this one by one. Okay, now you can just underline these parts which I've underlined. Okay, some important ones. Constructors are declared as member functions with the same name as the class. So how do you identify a constructor? Okay, the constructor will always have the same name as the class name. Okay, so like in this particular example, here the class name is employee. Okay, so how does the compiler know where a constructor is used? When it sees the member function having the same name as this class employee. Okay, so these are the data members, and this is the member function, right? This is the member function. Here we have two member function. One is this employee, as you can see the parenthesis. Okay, and then terminate by semicolon. So this is function declaration, and here also void display, right? So this is also a member function. So this is function, this is function. So as you can see that this is a normal member function, right? Function prototype declaration. But in this case, this member function and the class name, they look same, the names are same, right? So in this case, this is your constructor. Okay, and so one by one. Okay, so first thing is constructors are declared as member functions with the same name as the class. Okay, so how is the constructor used? They are declared, okay, or they are defined as member functions, okay, with the same name as a class. Constructors may also have arguments. If a constructor has arguments, then the arguments should be added to the declaration of any object of that class. Okay, and when the new operators use. Now this is parameterized constructor. Okay, which is in the following page. Well, when we come to that, I'll explain on that. Okay, meaning constructors can also have argument, means constructors can pass values, or constructors can pass parameters. Okay, how? Within the parenthesis. Okay, within the parenthesis, that is through here. Okay, through here, or yes, in here. Okay, so it can pass arguments here. Now the constructor job is to set up the object so that it can be used. Okay, so see, constructor job is to set up the object so that it can be used. So what is the main purpose of the constructor? The main purpose of the constructor is to ensure that object is initialized and object can be used properly. Okay, the object gets initialized. Okay, I'll come to that. Constructor is similar to a function, but with the following differences. So how is a constructor different from a normal member function? Because the constructor is also, as you can see, that the constructor is also declared inside the class, right, where the member functions are declared. So under the public label. Okay, so constructors are declared inside the class. In this particular example, you can see program, you can see the constructor is declared inside the class under the public access specifier, right? So uh, the constructor is similar to function, but with the following difference. So what is the difference between the constructor and the normal member function? Number one thing you observe is that constructor has the same name as class. The name of the constructor and the name of the class is same. The other member functions names will never be same as the class name. That is point number one. Okay, to identify the difference between a constructor and a normal, the difference between a constructor and normal member function. Okay, number two. Okay, constructors don't have return type. So this point, no return type, no return statement, no return type. So as you can see in this here, okay, and you'll see in all the other programs, okay, this is a normal member function where the return type is void. We always write void, okay, or sometimes if this function returns a value, we write int or float. That is provided that there is a function body, right? Okay, so if this member function, it may return void, okay, that means it does not return anything, okay, or it returns an integer value or float value. So but anyway we write void, right? Okay, but in the case of a constructor, we do not write even the word void. Okay, so constructors never have a return type. Okay, keep that in mind. And it does not, we do not write the keyword void also in while declaring a constructor. Okay, while declaring a constructor or while defining a constructor. Okay, why? Because the role of the constructor is only to initialize the object variables. Okay, no return statement. No return statement means what? Okay, in the case of this here, in the case of this particular constructor body, okay, this is the constructor declaration, this is the constructor definition. So in the case of this constructor, in the case of this constructor, there is a return, uh, there is a body that is to be executed, right? Now in terms, if suppose this constructor was not created, okay, then by default the compiler will create a constructor, but without these statements. Okay, that means it will within this function, within this body, okay, nothing will be written. So that means by default a constructor will be created by the compiler even if a constructor is not written. Okay, and then it will execute but without any return type, without any return statement. Okay, in that case what happens is that the object itself does not get initialized by that constructor. Okay, so we come back to here. Okay, see, constructors have one purpose: to allow you to guarantee that objects are correctly initialized. Like I said, okay, the only purpose of the constructor is that to guarantee that the objects are correctly initialized. Objects are correctly initialized, the object data members are correctly initialized. Okay, that means the objects is assigning the values to the data members, okay. Previously in the previous program you saw that if these data members are declared public, right, the object, suppose object is suppose like emb, right, then in that case the object can directly access the data members or assign the value to the data members by writing emb code equals to 100, emb name equals to Sujata, like that, right? Okay, so the object was directly able to access the data members. Or if suppose the data the private access, this is a private access specifier, how does the object access the data members? By using the member functions, right? Suppose like emb dot and suppose the another member function is written here. Suppose void input data, so emb dot input data, as we have seen in the previous programs, right? So using the member functions, okay, you explicitly call the member functions to access the function body, right? So that way you could assign the values to the data members, to the private data members. So using the object you were able to do that, right? Okay, so that was how you initialize an object data members, or that was how you initialize using the object directly if it was declared public, okay, or if it was declared private, you use the member functions to access the object data members, right? Okay, now but now that role is done by this constructor. Okay, so now the compiler will guarantee that your constructors are called inserting constructors call as necessary. So these are some of the special characteristics of a constructor. Okay, first one is generally declared in the public section. It is not generally declared in the public section, it is always declared in the public section. Constructor will always be uh, uh, declared in the public access specifier. Okay, a constructor will always be public. Okay, now uh, it cannot be private. Okay, a constructor cannot be private. If declared as private, okay, if we declare the constructor as, suppose we change this to private, okay, if we declare this constructor as private, okay, there is no way that you can access these member functions uh, outside of the class. This is inside the class, this is declared inside the class, right? So private data members or private member functions cannot be accessed outside of the class. And who accesses outside of the class? By the object, right? So if the constructor is declared as private, how can the object access this private member function? It's not possible, and it is not possible to be accessed outside of the class, right? But yes, provided if there is a public member function like this, it can be written inside that member function body, which we have seen in the previous programs, in the previous chapter, right? Okay, so keep in mind that constructor will always be declared in the under the public label. Okay, so if declared as private, the private properties methods cannot be accessed outside of the class. Okay, so another thing is that we cannot call it manually. Okay, why? Because by default constructor is called automatically. Okay, how is it called automatically? It means that, okay, as soon as here is it, here the object is not here, okay, but in this here next program, as soon as you declare an object using the class name, okay, as soon as you declare an object using the class name, irrespective of whether you declare a constructor, whether you write down the constructor name here or not, okay, the constructor will be called. A constructor will be called as soon as you declare an object, as soon as you create an object. Okay, so that is the role of the constructor. Okay, so second point, they are invoked automatically when the object of a given class is created. Okay, so that's why when an object is created or when an object is declared by the class, okay, the constructor will be invoked, the constructor will be called automatically. Okay, so there is no manual calling. Okay, it will be called automatically. Even if you do not write down, even if you do not declare this, write down this constructor name, okay, and this constructor body, okay, it will be called as soon as the object gets declared. Okay, if when the object gets declared, what will happen is that, okay, this default constructor will be called, okay, and then even if it is not written, and then the default constructor body will be executed without any return type and without any return statement. That means this body will not be there, but it will still execute, it will still call the default constructor. Okay, so they do not have any return type. Okay, then they can be overloaded. Okay, like other member functions, they can be overloaded. We have seen function overloading, right, where the functions can be reused again, with the same name can be reused again and again, right? So we'll be seeing that we have seen that in classes and object, also we'll be seeing that in constructors also. Okay, the same member functions can be used again and again, okay, or by different objects, okay, again and again. So now next part is they can have default arguments. We have already discussed about default arguments also, right? So default arguments also can be is also possible in the case of constructors, which I'll explain later on. Okay, then we cannot refer to this to their address. Okay, so that is also one more thing. Okay, the address of a constructor cannot be referred. Okay, so the rules, the following features and rules apply to C++ constructor. The name of the constructor must be identical to the name of the class. That is number one, which I've already explained. Okay, you cannot include any return type, not even void. Okay, that one. Then a class can have any number of constructors, including none. Okay, so a class can have any number of constructors. So there are different types of constructors. Okay, default constructor, copy constructor, parameters constructor, like that. So it can have as much constructor. uh, Class can have, class can declare here only one constructor is there, but you can declare as many constructor as you want depending on the class. Okay, or you can have none also. But if you have none, that means if this constructor is not written, okay, when an object gets declared, by default, okay, the default constructor will be called, okay, and then the constructor will get executed. So the compiler automatically creates a constructor for a class that has none. Okay, so the default constructor is the one that has no parameter, or it has parameter list in which all the parameters use default argument. So mostly in the case of a default constructor, it does not have any parameters, it does not pass any arguments. If you see the parenthesis, within the parenthesis nothing is there, right? No parameter, no variables are passed, no values are accepted, no arguments are passed or accepted, right? So this is how a default constructor looks like. Okay, blank. Okay, or if it does, it will have default argument pass. Okay, so copy constructor will come to that later on. Okay, so instantiation of a class, declaring an instance of a class, that is the object of a class, declaring an object of a class involves a constructor. Okay, why? Because when you declare an object, a constructor is called automatically. Okay, which constructor is called depends on how many constructors you have declared, and you declare the class instance. That means since you will have many constructors, right, when the object is called, which constructor will it call? It will depend upon the object, it will depend upon the object declaration